You won't see him waiting in the dark, sitting just inside the shadows so that the light doesn't touch him. And he has been waiting here for you for days. If you would have taken the time to slow down, you might have noticed the footprints surrounding the cabin in a calm and even stride. But now it is too late. Because you wounded him, you stole from him, and now it is his time to get his revenge. And all you can do is try to defend your life. But as seconds tick by, it becomes more and more apparent that the entire community around you will begin to wonder if man is really as strong as we think we are, or if the top predator is really that of the tiger. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. I am your host, Kayla. Amanda's here. And are you ready? Do you have any questions?
I don't even remember what this is about, but let's just shoot from the hip.
Okay.
Who cares? It'll be great.
It will be. This was, okay, I would just like to first mention that I read a book for this.
Okay.
It took me a year
to read the book. Why?
Because it wasn't just about the story. It wasn't just telling the story. It was like, we have this event happening, and the person who's involved in this event is this person, and they live here. So we're going to tell you about the entire century history of this area.
Was that relevant? Did
No!
that help? Oh.
Like, I mean, it could have been summed up very differently. And so it was like, okay, so we're going to tell you about this place, and then we're going to wind it eventually back to this guy, and then we're going to tell you about his history. And then we have this new guy come in, and we're going to tell you about his history. Oh, and he grew up in a different place, so we're going to tell you about that. And this all took place in Russia. So then it also like pulled in like the Russian like government and like the layers that are intertwined within like the complexities of it, and like all the different areas and like all the different things. And I was like, so most of the time when I read a book and I create a podcast episode out of it, it's at least 2 episodes, because there's just so much information. And this one was like, let me verify.
Scroll.
10 pages. And I was like, that's one episode. That's like an average like 45-minute to an hour long episode for me. Like, that's pretty good. But I read an entire book, and it took me a year because it was stupid how much nitty-gritty detail they went into.
Did you just have to, like, were you just continually abandoning it because you were just like, I mean,
yes,
I'm so over the Russian government history.
Yeah. It was like, I don't necessarily need to know about the background of this person who was part of the search party, and like his background was in mining.
Okay.
Which doesn't, it's
unless like they were trapped underground, like,
but they're not.
How are you going to tie that in?
So it was just like one of those books I was like, man, like I would read 3 pages and then be like, I can't. I was going to completely trash this episode. But then I was like, ooh, I want to do another animal attack episode, and I've done a lot of bear attacks, so I might as well get through it. So I ended up skimming. I would skim, and I figured out like he would put relevant information, for at least for me in this podcast, was like every 3rd page there would be a couple of paragraphs. And so I would just skim, and then as soon as I saw like the name or like tiger, or you already know where we're going with this, I would just be like, all right, 3 pages, found another one, cool.
Interesting. You kind of like studied his writing cadence in order to, you know, I think filter nonsense.
I think it would have been a good book if it was like I wanted to enjoy the book, but I was using the book as a source of information.
Yeah.
And so it was like, for me, it was just a lot of stuff that isn't relevant for this episode. But if you really like history and you want to learn more about Russia and you want to learn about tigers, the book is called The Tiger, A True Story of Vengeance and Survival by John Valiant. And if you're not into that, then I have summarized it here for you. Enjoy. As far as housekeeping goes, I'm going to announce some new information in January. I don't know when in January, but at some point I'm going to tell the public about
new year, new things.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have actually anything outside of tiger relations. So
it's kind of funny that, I mean, I'm super happy to be here, and I'm excited for the story. But it's funny that it's not Sam, considering the question he asked.
Oh my God, Sam! So he asked the question in one of the episodes. I don't remember what number it is, but it was about the first solo sailing around the world. It's called the Golden Globe, and they still do it today, where people will essentially race to be the fastest to get around the globe by sailing by themselves. They go down into the Southern Ocean and go around the 3 capes there and then come back. How we got on the subject of cheetahs in the middle of the episode, I don't know. I don't remember. It's in the episode, though, so if you want to listen to it, go back and listen to it. I actually had someone just recently on Patreon comment on the episode and was like, no, the cheetah's gonna win every single time. And I was like, yeah, see, like, I'm right. And Sam's like, so he brings it up quite often enough that I'm annoyed by the question at this point, like, because like there's a part of me that's like, okay, I have through this podcast I've been researching animals and like trying to better understand like their motives and how they react to different circumstances. We are going to talk about a kind of crazy one because people who know like house cats are like, yeah, they're kind of petty, and yeah, they'll do things because they're mad about things. And it's almost like part of me is like, yeah, that would be real predictable that like large cats would also have that same personality trait. Mm-hmm. But another part of me is like, that also almost seems like counterintuitive to survival, is like, oh, you've made me mad, so now I'm gonna act out. That's almost like, it's almost to me like house cats have that predatory action that they want to take, but they can't take it because they're living in a home, and so they fill that void by acting out in certain ways, which I could be completely wrong about. This entire story is based on the idea that this tiger is getting vengeance. So
yeah, I mean, vendettas don't really, it doesn't seem to be an evolutionary advantage for an animal.
I can't imagine.
So
in a place where like that would be like, yeah, that makes sense that this animal is like, you've done wrong to me, so now I'm going to do wrong to you. Okay, but we're going to get into it before I tell the story and not actually tell the story. So when someone first sets eyes on Yuri Trush, they tend to recoil a bit. He is a big guy, a strong guy, and you can tell just by the way he stands that if you were to fight with him, you would lose. Speaking of fighting with creatures that you would lose with, it might be the fact that he is a trained martial artist and an extremely skilled fighter. It might be because he has this air of something simmering beneath his calm demeanor, or maybe it is his eyes that seem to miss nothing. Trush often kept in shape by working out with a 70-pound kettlebell, which, for those people who do not do CrossFit like Amanda and I and are not familiar with kettlebells, it's a round weight with a handle on the top that is an extremely effective piece of equipment, and also a humbling piece of equipment, because you can be strong and like, you know, use dumbbells and pick up the same weight in kettlebell, and it's a completely different experience. So yeah, he just had like that 70-pound kettlebell, and he was like, I work out with this, and that's 70-pound kettlebell is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the size of this man, but it's it can be, you can. I mean, they can be very difficult to maneuver and.
Oh yeah.
Utilize. For
as much information this book gave, they actually did not tell me his height or his weight. So.
Okay.
So that's not super helpful. So he learned to shoot from his father at a young age. He learned karate, aikido, which is a Japanese form of martial arts. He became very skilled with a knife, and his size. Okay, so he must have been like a pretty tall, I would say tall, big guy individual. His size gave him an advantage in many situations as he was tall and broad, and he had a huge reach with his arms.
Okay, so he's a bigger guy, probably.
Yeah, I would...
Sounds like it.
I don't know how to put that. I'm going to say like 6'2", and Michael Phelps arms. That's what I'm imagining.
Okay.
So whatever it was, though, he was asked to be the leader of Inspection Tiger, which is an organization set up by the Russian government to set up sting operations to catch local poachers. And he didn't really, when he was approached by a friend about this, he kind of was like, I can't turn it down. But at the same time, he didn't really have a lot of background in police work, detective skills, or conservation like you might think this position would call for. He had previously held positions in gold mines. He spent some time maintaining shaft elevators in other mines. And then when Russia invaded Afghanistan in 1979, Trush volunteered to go and would end up holding rank as a lieutenant. So then, fast forwarding to 1994, he was approached by a friend for a new environmental conservation agency that was being formed, and this was Inspection Tiger. His job would take him into the taiga, or Russia's Far East, to hunt down predators of the humankind and work extremely hard to protect the tigers living in the wild. So, when you look at a map of Russia, there's a section of land between the Pacific Ocean and China. That is like, I mean, Russia's pretty far north. We already know that. So like as it like comes down, there's like just a small section of land. I say small because it's small on a map, but it's not really that small. And this is considered the taiga. I'm not 100% sure where or why it differentiates from the rest of Russia, but it is one of the most biodiverse regions in all of Russia, just based on its location to land and water, along with the fact that it sits in the lower Arctic tundra. And so in the summer, it reaches a high of about 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius, which is pretty mild when it comes to like temperature wise. But in the winter, temperatures plummet to a high averaging negative 11 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 24 degrees Celsius. So then, of course, when the sun goes down, the temperature drops even farther. This location, though, is an area where Arctic animals still thrive. Caribou and wolves are a common sight for this area, but the less common animals that you will see here include the Amur tiger. Amur tigers are also known as Siberian tigers, and they are the largest species of cat on Earth today.
Those boys are thick.
Yes.
They have to be in that region.
Have you seen the picture of a bear and a tiger next to the same tree in Russia?
No. I mean, okay.
They're the size of a bear.
Oof. Yeah.
Like, they're big boys.
Ugh. Yeah, no, I don't want to run into one of those ever.
Ever. Never. So they are extremely agile, quiet, and can seemingly disappear on a whim. Their size, though, makes this seem impossible. The Amur tiger is one of 6 subspecies that survive today, and it is the only species capable of handling the frigid Arctic landscape. Of the 6 species that live today, the only one that's population is considered stable is the Bengal tiger. All others have less than 500 animals alive.
Okay, those are very small numbers.
Very small. Some of them, I want to say they were numbers from 2022. Some of them had like 200.
Yeah.
Which is very sad. And I honestly didn't know that there were 6 subspecies of tigers. I thought I thought we had the Bengal and the Siberian, and that was like all that we had left. But that might be all that we have left pretty soon if
But don't worry, we're going to bring back dinosaurs, so...
Woolly mammoths?
There's a lot I could say about this topic. But it'll deter us a lot, so...
Yeah, well... Coming back. So Siberian tigers top out about 500 pounds or 226 kilograms.
Dude, that's so big.
They're
so
like
big.
A cat too. So like,
and still athletic.
And yeah, they can grow as long as 9 feet or 3 meters, and they stand about 3.5 or 1 meter high. And these cats can also pack a punch when they want to, with the capability of leaping 20 feet or 6 meters from a standstill. Some experts have concluded that Amur tigers, when needed, can jump, quote unquote, as high as it needs to.
Ugh.
Tigers have also been known to hunt down adult bears. However, they will usually play it safe, and most of their prey is in the form of boar, deer, and raccoons. So, one thing that I want to mention is I've been taking Logan to the zoo a lot. I've got a zoo membership. I'm trying to get my money's worth out of it. And I took him to the zoo a few weeks ago. And at our zoo, we've got a cougar. Well, it's snow leopard on one side, cougar on the other. And then next to the cougar, I think they have 2 separate tiger exhibits now because the tiger had babies, and so I think they're like weaning, in the process of weaning, or they just had them separated for some reason that day. But the babies are big. They're as big as mom, just about. Maybe not. They're gonna be big anyways, but they have a rock that is kind of near to the fence that they can jump up on. And so Logan and I were standing there as one of the babies went to jump up on this rock. And I kid you not, like he was just sitting like in the corner, like calm as could be. And then just like looked up at the rock and just like leapt up there, did not hear a sound. And I was like, you didn't hear his feet leaving the ground. You didn't hear him landing on the rock. And I was like, that is so cool. Also terrifying because you're not, if that thing comes after you, you're not hearing it.
Ugh. When you do, it's too late.
That is the entire premise of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tigers are known to be religious hunters. Clearly they are carnivores, and part of this is their ability to stalk their prey silently and to be able to determine what their prey might do so that way they can like plan ahead. And so similarly to how wolves and lions will kind of herd animals in a direction where they're being ambushed, tigers also ambush, but just like in a more predicted, like they're paying attention to like what the animal is doing along with like kind of what's around them, so that way they know like, okay, there's a stream here, the deer probably isn't going to rush into the stream, it's probably going to bound away from the stream, so like they're going that way. So there's a little bit of thought process for singular large animals who are hunters.
Yeah, I would say more than a little bit. I mean, cooperative hunting for wolves is, I mean, the topic is fascinating, but that is a much different task than a solo predator having to account for and calculate the hunt and like manage that with the environment. Like that's a very different skill and strategy, and I would imagine harder.
Oh yes. I don't think that I put it in here, but I believe the success rate for like solo hunters in the wild is somewhere around 30%. Like for out of 100 efforts, they're getting 30 kills, which is a lot of energy and not a lot coming back to you. But
it's interesting that they predate raccoons? Because that doesn't seem like, one, that seems like a very unfair fight. Two, that doesn't seem like a good enough payoff. But in the realm of this episode, it's and we all know where this is going because
Clearly.
It's tragedy with a view. So on top of being alone and having to calculate those variables, the tiger is asked to hunt a prey that it is unfamiliar with, most likely.
Yeah.
And humans are probably the most unpredictable, at least in terms of animal kingdom and for a tiger. So I don't know how this ends, but yeah, it's a big ask for this guy.
So I would counter that. I think humans are probably the most predictable.
The most predictable?
Yeah.
With these, or this tiger specifically, probably not a lot of human interaction. And so this is most likely a complete novelty, relatively so. Mm-hmm. And so this tiger might very well be curious more than anything, potentially. But yeah, I think in that way we are unpredictable because it's two different species. Humans can predict other humans very well.
Yes, I agree with that.
Generally speaking.
I think, honestly, I think the entire world and the dynamics and everything that happens is very predictable. Like, people continue to do the same things, and it doesn't take very, very long for, animals to recognize that. I mean, you look at the horses in the barn, and they very quickly figure out what time you're coming out to feed them. Mm-hmm. Kind of the same with dogs. Is like, time for food. And so, I mean, I think there's absolutely the capacity to learn the predictability, but having the spatial opportunity, especially in a place like this, where tigers are not interacting with people as much, like there might be some unpredictability in this particular case.
Yeah,
I think that's not entirely true.
Okay.
So coming back to tigers, they're not only skilled hunters, but they're well-equipped hunters with canine fangs the length of a human finger and claws that grow to 4 inches long that resemble meat hooks, but they are sharper and can cleanly slice through flesh, if you were not already aware of that about tigers. They live to about 10 years old in the wild, but in captivity, they can live to be about 20, and Amur tigers are extremely popular in zoos. So if you go to a zoo, you're probably looking at an Amur or Siberian tiger. In the 1940s, a study of the Amur tiger in Russia found that the population had dwindled to only 50 animals, and this was mainly due to the hunting of tigers to kind of protect the small communities that developed in the taiga. And then some people found the fur trade business loved tiger pelts. In addition to this, China was willing to pay high prices for different parts of tigers, and all of this combined led to the decimation of the species. A study in 2022 found that the wild population is estimated to be 260 to 480, which is a large range. But I think it's also extremely difficult to get a head count on a species that is extremely elusive. And so, in addition to that, they've been hunted for a very long time, so they probably have associated humans with bad. And so they're like, oh, I smell a person. I don't know where he is, but we're going to move away. And so it just makes it hard. Also, in a place that gets a lot of snow and is negative 11 degrees in the winter is not a fun place to research the animals. So, there's also problems with the loss of habitat due to people moving into the area and then logging and forest fires. But then also one of the other concerns that researchers are having is potential of inbreeding, which, so the Amur tigers are very specific to this location. And while researchers haven't seen yet like an actual problem because of inbreeding. It's just like a little note that they have in there that's like, oh, this could be a potential because we have a small condensed population. Eventually, I mean, it's bound to happen in the wild anyways, but eventually it might actually start to be a problem. So it's not a problem yet, and it might not turn into a problem because animals are crazy and their biologies are also insane. But it's just like an asterisk of like, keep an eye on this. I drew out an asterisk there. In the 1940s, when Russia had the realization that the tiger was going to be wiped from the earth, Russia was the first country to ban the hunting of tigers, and then started doing everything they could to protect the species. Today, you can see a lot of conservation groups stepping in, such as Wildcats Conservation Alliance, and this is because a lot of the groups that Russia had started in the 1900s have had their funding cut, and so the organizations can't work to the same capacity. This includes Inspection Tiger. Inspection Tiger was tasked with hunting down poachers and trying to combat the illegal fur trade and the black market trade of tigers. On December 5th of 1997, Trush received an urgent message saying that he needed to go to a small mining town near the Chinese border called Luchagorsky. Trush had received an assignment that was much more unusual than what he normally received. Because Inspection Tiger is typically tasked with protecting tigers from poachers, the fact that he was called to investigate the killing of a man by a tiger was already weird. What made this more difficult is that the man who was killed was Vladimir Markov, who was a known poacher. So, poachers in the 1990s, especially in Luchagorsky, took advantage of the fact that they were right on the border of China, and the Chinese loved tigers. Not just their fur, but they also used, the Chinese medicine used tiger organs, blood, and bones, and it was just, with the proximity, very easy to pass stuff over the borders and it be gone. It is estimated that in 2 years, from 1992 to 1994, 1/4 of the tiger population was poached and then sold to China.
Okay, what's the raw number at that time? Do we know?
I don't know.
What a quarter is? Okay.
But again, in the 1940s, there were about 50 animals. I don't know if there was like an upswing where the tigers like came back and then now they're diminishing again. I can't imagine that it would have gotten crazy higher than what we have now.
Okay, in 2 years.
I would say hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surprising given, I don't know how they do it. You'd think it'd be a little bit harder to poach a tiger. Cats are
big.
Well, it's not even just big, because if you have guns, then fine. But like we alluded to earlier, very elusive.
Yes.
Like, how are you, especially in an environment as rugged as this sounds? I assume it's mountainous. Like, how are you logistically finding and killing that many cats?
Dogs.
Okay.
They have dogs that are trained to track tigers, and then so some of the poachers were known to be gone for days at a time because they were following tracks or something. I think there was also like baits and traps that would be set, which is more opportunistic, I guess, than tracking. Tracking is much more direct. Yeah. And baits and traps, you kind of got to hope that what you want is coming.
And then you have to think about, especially if they're using organs and bones, like, how are you getting this cat?
Yes.
From a mountain. I helped my brother pull a white-tailed deer in Ohio, maybe half a mile, and it nearly killed me.
Yeah.
How are they doing that?
Yeah.
That's in large numbers.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It is impressive. And a lot of this poaching and selling was being done, not necessarily because people were looking to make a quick buck, but it was literally for their own survival. Like the area was very much a mining town, and as mining and logging. And so as those resources were removed, people who were left behind in these towns without any source of of income were now like, well,
yeah, now
what? And so a lot of people turned to the hunting of tigers because it was a good way to make money and be able to put food on their tables also at the same time. And children were often learning to provide for their families at an extremely young age because fathers would be following the mining or the logging, and so they would be gone for extended periods of time. Their family would be left at whatever town they started in, and to put food on the table, they would need to go out and hunt. And then as, they grow up, some would be lured by the money that a tiger could pull in. So it's December 5th, and Trush doesn't really know what he's walking into. He is determined to do his job, but he also has a bit of hesitancy because he is usually protecting tigers, not investigating them. And because he normally goes after poachers, he has had many encounters with people in the town of Luchagorsky. I think I've been saying that wrong. Luchagorsk. I think it's Luchagorsk.
I'll be honest. I don't think anyone listening is going to know the right way.
It's something. And so he knows that some of these people are probably going to be bitter towards him, and that they might not want to talk to him and might not want to assist in him figuring out what's happening here. So when Trush and his team arrive at Markov's cabin at about 3 p.m., he immediately notices an abundance of crows, which is a bad sign because they follow tigers. And what troubled him was that these crows were all in the trees, indicating that something was there. It was either dead or dying, and that it likely had a tiger with it, which was preventing the crows from going down to the ground and feeding on what was there. So, making this observation, he begins to walk around the cabin that Markov lived in. Trush came to some tracks in the snow that told a pretty clear story. So first, a large tiger had been walking around Trush's cabin and appeared to be getting into things as items on the porch were in disarray. But more telling were the tracks on the trail that led from the cabin. Here, coming down the trail, were footprints of a person, and then from the porch heading in the direction of that person, the tiger's tracks appeared to have been bounding with large gaps between close-knit clusters of all four paws. And then where the tiger's tracks met the person's tracks stopped, and all that was left was the tiger's. So,
oh my gosh.
There was very clear telling of what happened there.
Not even a scuffle?
Apparently. So the tiger's tracks then turned and headed straight for the area where the crows were congregating in the trees. And because Trush has to do his job, he starts to follow the tracks. And as he walks, he finds, first he finds the hind foot of a dog.
Oh.
And then he finds a glove and then part of a jacket sleeve that was covered in blood. As he continues, he finds the tracks led to a small clearing that contained a spot where the snow had melted away, indicating that something giving off a lot of body heat had been there for a significant amount of time. Inside the snow-free area, Trush found a human head and hand, and the face of the person was gone. It wasn't just like...
Oh my gosh. Ugh.
Yeah. It wasn't just like mangled or unrecognizable. It was like the flesh was torn away. So then there was a large bone, which they concluded was probably a femur. And then there were more tracks leading deeper into the forest. So he continues. His team of men are with him, and as they also have a hunting dog with them, which they use the dog as more of an alert system than anything else, because the dogs are trained to tell them like, hey, yeah, there's a tiger here, or there's like something dangerous to you. And the more agitated the dog gets, the more like the closer this thing is, right? In this case, it's a tiger. So as they follow the tiger's tracks, the dog starts to be making noise, indicating that she's extremely uncomfortable. But Trush knows that if he waits too long, any evidence left behind might be consumed or disappear further into the woods. And so he wants to take as much action as he can now, so that way he can get as much information before that information disappears.
So it's Trush and his dog, one dog?
He's got one dog, and then I believe it's a team of 4 men with him.
Oh, okay.
So
I think I'm confused as to why he was sent here. I mean, it's a poacher who was clearly killed by a cat. I mean, it doesn't take Sherlock to figure this out. Like, what is he hoping to find and figure out, I guess, is my question.
So this might be a good time to mention that the people in these communities have the understanding that tigers are vengeful creatures, and that if you take or kill a tiger, if you take from a tiger, the tiger is going to come and take from you, or if you kill a tiger, another tiger is going to come kill you. And so
ironic for a community that is poaching tigers.
I agree.
What?
I don't necessarily believe with like that sentiment, but it's, I think, because a person was killed very clearly by a tiger, it became a question of like, is this a one-off thing, or do we have a man-eater on our hands?
Again, ironic for a community that is hunting tigers. Like,
I agree.
What do you mean? They're man-eaters if you get close enough. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you worried about it now?
Yeah. Okay, tigers come and attack you if you attack them. Weird.
Yeah. Like, okay.
So, anyways, yeah, it's, I think because he had the most interaction with and understanding of tigers is why he was called. Essentially, it was because it was like, hey, you know tigers, you know how to track people in these areas, and you know how to interact with people, and you know this area, so go here and investigate this and let us know what's going on. Even with this stuff going on and the potential for a man-eating tiger being there, Trush and his team are extremely limited on what they can do, because tigers were so protected that only under very specific circumstances of self-defense would you be allowed to kill a tiger and not have some sort of repercussion from it. So,
okay, the incentive for this guy has to be low to do this.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, outside of like his job and just kind of doing what his boss man tells him.
It's like, I know you've spent a lot of years protecting tigers, but we want you to investigate something we already know the answer to, and also your defense mechanisms and opportunities are limited because they're protected. Like,
extremely limited.
No, I'm not doing this.
No, thank you.
No thanks.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So the government was so adamant about protecting the species that in order for Trush to kill the tiger, he would need permission from the government. In order to get this permission, he would need to have information showing that this tiger was a danger to the communities. And in order to do that, he had to go collect evidence from the scene, which is kind of how he ended up here. And
I mean, you could have probably stopped at the skull with no face.
You could have, and the tracks where it was like very clearly like this person didn't even see the tiger coming.
Yeah.
And like clearly because it was just like he was just walking up and then gone.
Yeah.
So they're obviously concerned that this tiger is attacking people out of vengeance because that's what tigers do apparently in the taiga.
Yeah.
But Trush was also needing evidence, right? Like the only way that he's getting that evidence is if he goes to where the tiger attacked this person. And unfortunately, the tiger was still in the area. So with the dog's agitation, Trush and his team shoulder their rifles and press forward. And after a couple of minutes, they come to a second spot in the snow that has been melted away. And in this spot, they find Markov's boots with his bones were protruding up out of them. And then like they're like broken off halfway.
Oh my gosh.
And then a torn shirt is found that still had his arm inside the sleeve. So they're finding bits and pieces of this guy at this point. And it was about now that their dog begins to get extremely agitated. She's pacing back and forth. She's barking. And everyone just kind of becomes silent and freezes as a low rumble reverberates through the small clearing.
Oh.
As the rumble grows into a roar, it seems to come from every direction at the same time, and unwilling to put themselves in an ambush position, Trush and his men cautiously back out of the area. But to try to understand what happened or how this happened, Trush would begin to interview people in this area, and some would actually talk to him because they had more respect for Markov as a person than they did bitterness towards Trush for the poaching problem. So the community wanted Markov's story told, and vengeance would be sought against the tiger, even though they were not willing to go after the tiger themselves. Because you kill a tiger's going to come kill you.
This is a very backward, never-ending circle type of situation.
It is, yeah. So what he ends up learning is that Markov had been going around bragging that he had killed a tiger cub recently, even though there was no proof. It was, no one saw it happen. No one saw the body of a cub. He had absolutely nothing to prove that he did this. It was almost like he was boasting, like, yeah, I've done this thing. So in addition to this, Trush learns that on December 1st or 2nd, which was just a few days prior, Markov was hunting when he stumbled upon a freshly killed boar. He decided this would be an easy dinner, cut off the hind leg, and returned to his cabin. Theoretically, of course, when the tiger returned to the boar that it had killed, it found that its dinner had been tampered with, and because Markov's scent was all over the kill, the tiger simply followed the scent and was led back to Markov's cabin.
Okay, that feels a little far-stretched, but...
At some point, Markov noticed the tiger hanging around his cabin and not just, like, walking around it, but attacking the items on his porch, pouncing at windows and pressing against walls. What terrified Markov most was that there was a potential entry point so Markov's cabin was set deep into the woods, and he was an opportunistic hunter. And so he had flaps in his walls at different heights that he would be able to, if he noticed like a deer or a boar or something walking by his cabin, he would be able to put the end of his shotgun through the flap and pull the trigger without ever leaving his cabin.
Okay.
So he was nervous that the tiger would figure out that there were flaps here and he would be able to find a way in, which also seems kind of weird to me because...
500-pound cat is going to get through a flap.
Right.
I mean, unless they're enormous flaps, which...
I can't imagine.
Seems unlikely in this region of Russia.
Yep. I agree. It would
be an unlivable house.
I agree. So he sees this tiger and he notices that it's like attacking the things that are on his porch and around his cabin. And like if it sees him through the window, it's jumping at his windows. So he sees the tiger on one side of his cabin and he rushes to his front door where he had left his rifle just outside of the door. So it was outside. So he grabs his rifle, gets back inside, times things perfectly, and was able to crouched near one of the flaps that the tiger was near, stuck the gun barrel through the flap, and then pulled the trigger. This shot struck the tiger in the right front paw or in the lower leg and caused it to flee.
This is confirmed? Like, I assume we figured this out later at some point?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a story that he was telling people.
Oh, okay.
In the community.
Okay.
On December 3rd, Markov was making his way out of the woods from hunting or poaching and was heading back to his cabin where he had no idea the tiger was waiting to pounce. And as we already know, Trush didn't have the capacity to kill the tiger, and therefore he and his group left the location that Markov had been killed at, but they would still be tracking this tiger as, to conclude their investigation. But as they did so, a few things became apparent. At first, they thought that there was like 2 potential tigers going off after Markov. First worried that the mother of the tiger cub that Markov had claimed to kill was coming for vengeance, but they pretty quickly determined that the paw size of this tiger was too big to be a female. They also didn't really believe that Markov had actually killed a tiger cub. There was just absolutely nothing to support this. So they figured out the tiger was male and that it must have been the tiger that Markov stole the hind leg of the boar from. And this tiger was the same one that had been on the porch that he had shot. As the days that passed, as they were tracking this tiger, they were finding a single bloody tiger print that they were able to see in the snow, and the print was becoming smaller and smaller until 4 prints became 3, and the tiger was no longer putting weight on that front right paw. As the news of the tiger and the direction it was traveling in spread, communities began to get a little more on edge. On December 9th, Trush received a letter from the Federal Administration for Biological Resources, and it read, "This is to approve the shooting of the man-eating tiger. The official permit will be issued upon receipt of the shooting report." Which feels like a weird way to say, do your damn job and you won't get in trouble.
Yeah.
So now, though, Trush has what he needs to defend himself against this tiger. So they knew the next time they came across it, there would be no backing out of the situation. In Sabolani, which is a nearby town, Andre Pochipnaya.
Yep, that's exactly how they say it.
Andre and Dennis were both 20 years old and best friends. They had just arrived back home from being released from the army. Prior to going into the army, they had been hunting and trapping with their fathers. So they've had this history of hunting and trapping as young boys. So when they were reunited back at home, they very quickly fell into this pattern again. But with the tiger being in the area, everyone was on edge, and Andre and Dennis's families forbade them from going into the woods. Andre's family owned an additional cabin deep in the woods that the boys would regularly use as a base for their hunting and trapping. And so this order from his family to not go hunting did not sit well with Andre. He fought with his mother, and then on the morning of December 12th, their neighbor, Leonid, watched as Andre slung his rifle over his left shoulder and set out into the woods. Or as a day passed, and then another and another, Andre did not return home. Finally, on December 15th, a group of men, so this was 3 days after he had left, a group of men decided that they were going to go out and look for Andre. All of them were armed, and when they arrived at the cabin of Andre's family, they found tracks of a tiger and tracks of a man. Following the tracks, they found, again, very little. In a clearing, there was trampled down snow, not quite melted, but in the snow was Andre's rifle. When Dennis, who was, again, his best friend, picked up the rifle to inspect it, he found that the gun had been loaded and that a bullet had a single divot in it where the firing pin had made contact. But with the bullet still being in the chamber, they figured that the gun misfired.
Ugh.
But this is an indication that the tracks did not cross at separate times. So they, at this point, assumed that Andre had taken a shot at the tiger. With the misfire, the tiger had the opportunity to attack.
Is it a 3-legged tiger?
So it doesn't actually mention
Okay.
If the tracks are three-legged or not, but also bearing in mind that this group of men are not tiger inspector people, and so they might not have even been thinking to look to see if it was an injured tiger. They might have just saw the footprints of boots and the footprints of a tiger and were like, we know what happened. We know what we're coming across. About 50 yards away from them, the men saw a heap of what was left of Andre. This time, it was tattered and torn clothing, his boots, and tiny pieces of flesh. Over the 3 days between Andre leaving home and this group of men coming to find him, the tiger had attacked and consumed almost all of him. So, Inspection Tiger had not been fast enough to prevent a second person being killed from this tiger. So with this news, they changed their plan. They would now have 2 teams of 4 men each tracking the tiger, and they would be tracking the tiger at like 24 hours a day. So basically what they were doing was they would have 2 teams working at specific times. One would track the tiger and then communicate to what their location was. And then the next team would catch up to that, go directly to that location, and then continue tracking the tiger, instead of both trying to figure out the direction the tiger was going by following the trail. Again, they did this for days. Tracking this tiger who seemed to be just ahead of them and then completely out of reach at the same time. Finally, on December 21st, nearly 3 weeks after Markov had been killed, they found the tracks were showing a weakened animal. The front right paw that had been held clear of the snow was now dragging, but the men still felt like they were too far behind it. They ended up coming to a road where the tiger had crossed, and so they stopped so that way they could find the tracks on the other side of the road. And when they did, one of Trush's men, Pionka, crouched near the prints and gently pressed his hand into the paw print, and it was at this moment that everything changed. The print was still emitting warmth.
Oh.
The tiger was somewhere literally just ahead of them. So Trush, Pionka, and a third man, Shibnev, would grab their rifles and shoulder them and then proceed forward into a clearing. After a few minutes, Shibnev had a gut feeling that he couldn't press away. He calmly suggested that they spread out, and just as the trio settled into a kind of triangular shape, so it wasn't like fully like equal distance triangle. It was like one person was kind of more farther out to the right, and then one person was kind of in the center, and one person was out to the left. Just as they settled into this position, as they were several steps away from each other, with Trush in the center, a tiger exploded out of some brush directly at Trush. He was able to get off 2 shots before the tiger knocked him to the ground, but it was Pionka and Shibnev who made the difference. Because of Shibnev's suggestion to spread out, this put them in a great position where both Pionka and Shibnev, who were flanking Trush, were able to take shots at the tiger without putting the other man in the background. Between the two, 11 shots were fired, and at 12:35 p.m., the tiger hit the ground and the momentum carried him into a roll and past where Trush fell. Sadness seemed to fill the silence as Trush picked himself up off the ground and looked at that magnificent creature that the tiger was. The tiger was extremely underweight, as indicated by the ribs that clearly showed through the russet orange and black stripes of fur. Its powder white belly and chest held fur so soft, Trush could understand the reason why people would want a pelt. Its eyes were slanted and exaggerated by black fur outlining them like he had put makeup on, and though the tiger would never breathe again, it held so much power and strength that the men still stalled on what to do. Finally, though, they carefully loaded up the tiger's body and brought it in for the conclusion of the case. It was after the fact that Trush had his own wounds addressed, with claw marks on his back and arms and thighs. He sought out bandages, but found that the wounds on his thighs were so deep that they would require stitches, which is not surprising to me.
No.
For whatever reason, a necropsy was not officially performed. For people who don't know, a necropsy is a autopsy on an animal. But in their investigation, they found that the tiger had been shot many times by many different weapons. The tiger was delivered to the Arsenev Museum, which is where it was stuffed and put on display. I actually tried to look up to see if it was still at the museum, and I couldn't find it conclusively that there was an exhibit of it, but I also couldn't find where they pulled the exhibit. So I'm not sure if it's still on display or if it's not still there, or if there might just be a Russian languaged article about it that I can't read because Russia. Yeah. So for many cultures in the taiga, tigers are animals to be respected and to give honor, and it is also understood that you do not take from a tiger, as I've already mentioned, for it will seek revenge by taking life from you. And if you take the life of a tiger, tigers will come to kill you. Speaking of tigers, my cat just bit me.
Speaking of revenge.
That's not nice. Are you mad at me? I got a puppy and she's mad at me for it. She's like, I can't come out of hiding now. With the knowledge now that the tiger had been shot by so many different guns, one could theorize that Markov maybe wasn't the instigator here, but instead the tiger had finally had enough of being shot at. Maybe the tiger decided to take back control of its habitat, or maybe this tiger had been shot so many times because it was the one who sought vengeance for other tigers that had been poached. This tiger was the balancing force. His amba had already been ignited, and it took trust to bring him down. So the amba is basically the spiritual force that's oh, you killed another tiger, I will kill you.
So he was the feline punisher.
Pretty much.
Is what they're saying. Okay. Yeah.
And while, in this case, some men might feel that they hold the power over nature, I can guarantee that the men who faced this tiger as it leapt at them, teeth bared and claws out, had a much different thought running through their head. And that's what I got.
Yikes. That's pretty gnarly to come across a dismembered comrade for some of them.
Yeah. I think if I was ever to come across a dismembered body, the first thing that would come to my mind is I'm hallucinating. I'm clearly hallucinating because there's no way that I'm actually seeing what I'm seeing. I would just not believe it until somebody was nope, that's a body, Kayla.
Yeah, you get confirmation. I mean, yeah, your brain is probably trying to make sense of it at first.
Or the people who have come across bodies and they look at that and they're wow, that's a really weird shaped rock.
Yeah.
And then it's, not a rock. So
yeah. It's because dead bodies look strange.
They do.
It's so weird. It's so weird. I think it's a really fascinating occurrence, though, because there has to be some kind of evolutionary explanation for it, but it's very clearly someone is alive and then they are dead, and there's a really clear delineation.
Yeah.
Physically.
Yes.
And visually.
Yes.
And it's creepy.
There's a Facebook page that I follow. It's actually not a page, it's a group for trying to help identify people that have been found unalived. And I mean, it's never anything gruesome that they're posting. They're always just we're trying to identify this person. They were brought into the hospital because they got in a car accident and didn't have any wallets on them. The car was reported stolen. They just don't have a way to identify the person that's there. And every now and then, I'll be scrolling and it's I'll scroll past. They'll usually have a facial picture of the person. Sometimes they have if a person had identifying tattoos, they'll show the picture of the tattoos. But it's always I'm very much I don't get on Facebook to interact with people. I'm just scrolling because I need to disassociate with whatever for the day. Facebook is not the place that I go to engage with people. And so I'll just scroll and I'll scroll and I'll scroll and I'll scroll. And like sometimes I go past one of those pictures and I'm like, what did I just see? And I'll need to go back and scroll. And I'm like, what is wrong with this person?
They post the dead person's face?
Yes.
Okay. Is that even allowed? Like, how did they get permission to do that? If they're trying to identify who it is. That would be really jarring.
It's the Unidentified Project for anybody who's curious. And a lot of it is not actual people. It's like computer animated things, drawings. I was gonna see if one like popped up
and
real
the
quick,
occasional corpse.
but it's very occasional. Let's see. There's I'm scrolling back through November now, and like it's not very often that this happens.
Okay.
But like it's enough that I'm like, oh. Like
yeah.
I like go and I look at it and I'm like, oh. Yeah, oh shit, I gotta get Logan. I gotta go get Logan. Okay, we're gonna end this real fast because I did not pay attention to the time and I have to go pick up my child from school. But yeah, the Unidentified Project will sometimes show you dead people.
And that's how we're gonna end it.
And that's how we're gonna end it. So thanks for listening and come back next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.
What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithaview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.